Hello everybody, and it's back to another Houdini tutorial, and you know what time it is. It's Houdini 19 time. We've waited a long time for this. I'll be honest, I didn't think this day would come, and I'm honestly so happy for it. So the first thing we're going to talk about that's new in Houdini 19 is the Spark SOP. Let me play with back what I have so far in the scene. So as you can see, the Spark SOP does something wonderful. It allows us to be lazy and not make sparks anymore, which is fantastic. So what we're going to do is do a quick walkthrough on Houdini 19. Let's get started. So let's start with a sphere. So the first thing you're going to need, you can't just put down a Spark SOP in Houdini 19 and just hope that the sparks happen. You do need to put down your regular geometry and your pop nets. So that's what we're going to do first. Sphere theater. So we have a frequency of 9, and we've just kind of customized the sphere as much as we feel is necessary. And then I've added some attribute noise because I wanted to scatter some points on the surface. So I've just, as you can see, the interface is different in Houdini 19. They've added a bunch of new parameters and drop-down menus for the attribute noise. It's cool and it's interesting, and it will tell you what your parameters are. So this is for the noise value and this is for the noise pattern. So no need to get confused between element size and amplitude anymore. So we've kind of just played with those parameters. I haven't played with anything else. Really cool thing about everything else in Houdini. So there's these really customizable drop-down menus, so you can do that. And when you click on them, you'll notice that they suddenly become active. So you'll suddenly be able to see more parameters the more you activate stuff underneath the drop-down menus, which is great. Then we've added a scatter onto there. So I've done a density attribute called CD, and I've scattered about 300 points. The next thing I've done for an attribute op is that I wanted to add some velocity onto this. So what I've done is just stuck a multiply from parameter position into the position, and then I've added a multiplication value. So based on this parameter, whatever default float value I give it is how much it's going to be multiplied against the velocity that we're putting onto here. So we can have a longer trail length. The next thing I've done is that I wanted to add some noise onto this velocity. So I've dropped down a point velocity SOP. So I've set this to a set value and just basically turned on the curl noise, and it gave me that. So that's kind of useful. Haven't touched any of the other parameters. Next thing I've done is translated this upwards. So it is now 4 meters in the air. Cool thing about Houdini is that Houdini, because it's a Canadian brand, we operate on meters. So Houdini, everything in Houdini is measured by meters. So every time you translate it by 1, that's 1 meter in the air. Cool. So then we've added a pop net. So diving into this pop net, you can see a few things have started to happen. We have added a ground plane. We dive inside, and it's basically a simple pop setup. So we have our source first input, which is bringing in our points and first context geometry. Going to the birth, you can see that our parameters look a little bit different. I've just added an impulse activation through this little formula. So basically it is emitting points every 12 frames. I then copied these and paste the relative reference of this into the constant activation. And I've left everything else the same. The next thing I've done is not touched anything on the pop solver. Then I've laid down a ground plane. I played with the bounce and the bounce friction on here, and then I've added a gravity. The gravity is bringing everything down, so we have just a standard gravity force being applied. Next thing we're going to do is delete that ground plane, so we can delete the stream, everything but the stream source first input from the pop nets. So when we play this back, we should see some points get scattered across a ground plane. And that's kind of what we want. Looks pretty cool. You can also delete your ground plane by playing with the object parameter here, but I always find putting down delete node is just my personal preference. You can go to the attribute delete and then delete everything but the velocity. The next thing you'll want to do is go play around with the spark SOP. So this is the spark SOP is also known as a particle trail or spark trail. And so you'll notice that it automatically drops down a time blend. So if we drop it down in Houdini, we go spark, it will give us a spark trail. We put it down, and you'll notice it automatically will come in with a retime. Houdini will think for a couple seconds, and it will then drop down the spark trail. So it's quite simple and easy to understand. I'm so excited about this tool. Sorry, very much fangirling right now. So if we drop down to here and we look at our spark trail, you can see that there is options for playing with the alpha of the sparks, the intensity. So if you play with the intensity, you can see that plays with basically the overall brightness of them when you go to render. The color, again, up to you, personal preference when you go to render. Turn off the velocity trails. And then you can play with the seed, or the color, the seed of the color. So you can choose to customize that over color along length. So you can do something kind of like that, which I'm kind of preferring at this point. You can play with color again through a ramp as well. So that's really interesting. And then you can do color over normalized age as well. So it's really up to you. Then you can do enable split. So what this will do will allow Houdini to think for a few seconds. But before I turn it on, I'm going to play this back for you, so you can kind of get a better idea of how it handled the information from our PopNet. So you can see it killed basically any particles that come to a full rest, which is great. So we don't really need to do that anymore. If we go to the enable split, you can see percent to split. It's not going to really do anything until, let's play it back and see what happens. You're going to notice everything slows down a little bit. It's not useful to have on all the time because it's immensely heavy. And right now we don't really need it because we don't have the information on how to use it. But if you hover over it, you can see that this enables the splitting of the trails to mimic the look like bursting sparks or splashing rain. So basically, if you're making sparks and they come like into impact with an object very quickly, you probably want this on. Keep in mind it eats up a lot of RAM, which is why we're not using it today. So now we get down to the shape. So the trail method, you can choose between frame and shutter. So if you switch over to shutter, you can see that you get a very different combination of sparks. And then frame is basically handling it like a regular trail SOP would. So the more frame durations, the longer the sparks will be. When you go down to shutter, you can kind of see that it handles it as a camera would. So if you wanted to customize sparks based on a camera kind of moving, this might be the thing to turn to. You can then customize the width for rendering. And then the outputs, you can output anything you like. So that's how you would handle sparks in Houdini. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. My name is Kate, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.